She had saved his life once. He had saved hers once. Neither of them knew about the other. They were about to find out on a city bus in Memphis, Tennessee, 11:52 on a Tuesday night in the rain. Consider what that means for a moment. The woman behind the wheel had been driving the same route through South Memphis for 9 years, earning $14.85 an hour, learning the weight of every stop, memorizing every face that came through those doors before the city had finished deciding to wake up. She held the door open 40 seconds longer than regulation permitted at a single stop every single morning, and nobody had ever told her to do it, and nobody had ever thanked her for it, and she had never needed either of those things to keep doing it. The man who stepped onto her bus on this particular Tuesday night had $3.4 billion to his name, a freight company with 20 trucks running loads across 41 states, and a Patek Philippe on his left wrist that had belonged to his mother before a highway took her from him when he was 11 years old. He had no wallet, he had no phone, he had no way to pay the $175 fare. He sat down 3 rows back without a word, rain soaking through a suit that had cost $4,800 when he bought it, and the bus moved forward into the dark, and the streets of Memphis came and went outside the glass in long, wet streaks of amber and red. Neither of them said anything about what had happened between them 6 years ago on I-55. Neither of them could, because neither of them knew the full story yet. That is the thing about the moments that change your life. They rarely announce themselves at the time. They happen in the middle of an ordinary shift, on an ordinary stretch of wet asphalt, in the dark, when you are tired and the clock is running and the easiest thing in the world is to keep going. The hardest thing in the world is to stop. She had stopped. She did not know his name when she stopped. She did not know about the company or the 20T300 trucks or the 41 states or the building in downtown Memphis that bore his name in letters 4 feet tall above the entrance. She only knew there was a man on the ground and she could hear him trying to hold on, and the ambulance was 11 minutes out and someone needed to stay with him until it arrived. So she stayed. 11 minutes on a highway shoulder with the traffic moving past them both and the rain just beginning, and her hand holding his head still against the asphalt, because that is what you do when the situation calls for it and you are the only person there. When the ambulance came, she told them what she knew, which was not much, and she walked back to her bus and she bows sand, and she sat down behind the wheel, and she drove the rest of her shift, and she went home and she made dinner, and she did not tell anyone. Not because it wasn't worth telling, because to her, there was nothing extraordinary about it. Someone needed her to stay. She stayed. That was the whole story, as far as she was concerned. You do not wait around for ordinary decency to be rewarded. You go back to work. It was not the whole story. It was, in fact, the beginning of a story that would take 6 years to finish telling itself. A story that would move through a hurricane and a carjacking and a boardroom betrayal, and 8 mornings on a river levee before it finally arrived. At the moment, these 2 people were sitting in the same vehicle on a Tuesday night in Memphis, and the rain was falling, and the bus was moving, and neither one of them yet understood what the other one had done. By the time this bus reached the end of the line, nothing about either of their lives would look the same. And the reason had nothing to do with money, though money would change hands before it was over. It had everything to do with what a person does when stopping costs more than they can afford and they stop anyway, because the alternative is something they cannot live with. She had already answered that question once, in the dark on a highway, without knowing she was being tested. He was about to find out she had. If you are watching this from anywhere in the world tonight, drop your city and your local time in the comments below. I want to know where this story is finding you. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now and turn on your notifications. This one is going to stay with you. I want to make sure you are here for all of it. The alarm on Yvette Caldwell's phone went off at 4:09 in the morning, the same time it had gone off every weekday for 9 years. She did not hit snooze. She dressed in the dark navy uniform pants, navy shirt, creases still sharp from Sunday's ironing, black work boots laced to the second-to-last eyelet because the last eyelet pulled wrong after a long shift, and she had learned that in year 1. She made coffee in a machine that had belonged to her mother, and that made a sound like a slow argument every time it ran, drank half of it standing at the kitchen counter, poured the rest into a thermos, and went to work. The depot on Airways Boulevard smelled like diesel fuel and burned coffee and the industrial cleaner they used on the garage floor. 6 buses idled in the yard, their engines running low in the cold, exhaust curling into the dark in slow white columns. The fluorescent lights in the driver's room ran slightly too blue, giving everyone in it the look of people who had not quite slept enough, which was accurate. Nadine was at the coffee machine when Yvette came in. Nadine drove Route 52, the crosstown, and she was reading something on her phone with the expression of a person receiving news they had expected and resented. She looked up when Yvette set her bag down. "They're cutting the 50 in 6 weeks," Nadine said. "Official memo came down yesterday. Budget reallocation, effective the 1st of next month." Yvette opened her locker. She took out her route bob binder and her spare badge and set them on the shelf above coat. "I saw it," she said. "You can transfer to the 40. Or the 23, both have open slots. I know. The 40 runs Midtown to East Memphis. Good ridership. Cleaner stops. I know what the 40 runs, Nadine." Nadine put her phone in her pocket. She understood when a conversation had reached the edge of what it could hold. She poured her coffee and left. Yvette stood at her locker a moment longer than she needed to, her hand flat on the shelf, not moving. The Memphis Area Transit Authority operated 28 fixed routes across Shelby County. Route 50 was not the longest and not the highest ridership. By the metrics that mattered to the people who wrote budget memos, it ranked among the least efficient lines in the system. According to the American Public Transportation Association's 2023 operational data, MATA spent 314s per revenue mile, among the lowest funded urban transit systems in the country, 41% below the national average. When cuts came, they came to routes like the 51st. That was not cruelty. That was arithmetic. What the arithmetic did not count was the 34% of households along the Route 50 corridor with no access to a personal vehicle. It did not count the 3 dialysis appointments per week that depended on the 715 southbound run. It did not count the woman at stop 7 on Person Avenue who needed the door held open 40 seconds longer than regulation because her left knee had been replaced 18 months ago and the steps were steep and she was 79 years old and had nowhere else to be but where the 50 took her. The arithmetic was not wrong. It just wasn't counting everything. Yvette had been counting everything for 9 years. She pulled out of the depot at 4:47, 2 minutes behind the posted schedule because a bus had blocked the exit lane during its engine check. She made it up by the 3rd stop. She knew this route the way a person knows a piece of music their hands have memorized. The long, flat stretch of Elvis Presley Boulevard in the dark, the left onto Crump, the precise way the suspension felt crossing the railroad at Kansas Street, the exact moment the downtown skyline appeared above the rooftops, and the Mississippi showed itself gray and wide to the west. At stop 7 on Person Avenue, she opened the doors at 5:03 and held them. 1 second, 10, 20. The supervisor's voice sat in her memory. "Caldwell, you are running 40 seconds behind at stop 7 every single morning. You understand that, Cascades?" She had nodded. She had said she understood. She did understand. She also understood stop 7, which the supervisor did not. 35 seconds, 40. The sound of slow footsteps on the bottom step, then the top. The familiar weight settling into the first seat behind the driver's partition. A soft exhale, the kind that means a person has made it somewhere they needed to be. Yvette closed the doors and pulled back into traffic. She ran the rest of the morning without incident and took her break at Central Station, standing outside in the October air with the second half of her thermos, not thinking about the memo. She was thinking about stop 7 and the 40 seconds and whether the woman who needed them knew they existed, or whether she simply believed, as many people do about the small mercies built quietly into their days, that the world had arranged itself this way on its own, without anyone deciding to hold a door. She picked up the evening overtime shift because the rent on the Orange Mound apartment had gone up $60 in September. $60 was $60. She was on her last run of the night southbound on 3rd Street when the rain started, not the slow kind, the Memphis kind, the kind that arrives without discussion and means it. At 11:52 p.m., at the stop on Beale Street and 2nd Avenue, a man stepped out of the rain and onto her bus. No wallet, no phone, a suit that had cost more than her monthly rent, soaked through to the collar, a watch on his left wrist that caught the interior light and held it differently than other things held light, heavier, older, the way objects carry the memory of who last loved them. He stood at the fare box and looked at it and did not speak. Yvette looked at him in the rearview mirror. A full second. 2. She had seen people on this bus in every condition that life arranges for people. Exhaustion, grief, the specific blankness of someone still processing news that hasn't finished landing. She had seen men in expensive suits before, stranded and stripped of the things that usually insulated them from exactly this kind of night. There was something else in this man's face, a familiarity she couldn't locate. The way a song will play and you know you have heard it before but cannot place where or when. She filed it away. "Sit down," she said. "End of the lines in 38 minutes. She closed the doors. She pulled back into the rain. The bus moved south through Memphis in the dark, and the man sat 3 rows back and said nothing, and Yvette drove the way she always drove, steady, unhurried, like someone who understood that the people behind her had somewhere to be, and it was her job to get them there. She did not know yet that she had already done that job for this particular passenger once before. 6 years ago, on a different road, in a different kind of dark. Roland Beaumont had not ridden a city bus since he was 17 years old. The last time had been a Tuesday in January 1984, the number 8 line running south through Memphis, standing room only, pressed between a man with a bag of groceries and a woman in a church coat reading a Bible with a broken spine. He had been on his way to a job interview at a dry cleaner on Kerr Avenue, his application folded in his pocket, his shoes borrowed from a neighbor because his only pair had a hole large enough to let in weather. He did not get the job. He got the next one. He had not needed a bus since. You don't think about what carried you when you are busy moving forward. He was not moving forward tonight. Roland grew up at 1418 Kerr Avenue, South Memphis, in a shotgun house 12 feet from the sidewalk. His father, Eugene, had worked the loading docks at the port of Memphis for 31 years. Lifting, hauling, stacking, moving freight off the river and into the country, 6 days a week, never late, never absent without cause. Eugene Beaumont believed in showing up. He transmitted this belief to his son the way people transmit the things that kept them alive. Not by saying it, but by doing it every morning while the boy was still watching. His mother Phyllis had been quieter about her beliefs, but no less certain. She worked the checkout line at a grocery on South 3rd Street and taught Sunday school at Greater Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and she had a way of looking at a problem, tilting her head slightly to the left, as if listening for something the problem hadn't said yet, that Roland had inherited without knowing it. Phyllis Beaumont died on a Tuesday evening in November 1979. She was 34 years old. A car ran a red light on I-55 northbound near the Airways interchange at 54 miles an hour. The ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. Roland was 11 years old, doing homework at the kitchen table, when his father came home and sat down in the wrong chair and said the wrong thing, and the world divided fed itself into before and after without asking his permission. He had not spoken of this to anyone in 45 years. It was not a secret. It was simply the kind of thing that sits at the bottom of a person and does not require language. You build everything else on top of it, and you keep going, because that is what Eugene Beaumont modeled, and modeling is the only instruction that lasts. He started Beaumont Freight Solutions in 1994 with $3,200 in savings, a rented Freightliner, and a single contract hauling paper goods from Jackson, Tennessee, to Nashville. He drove the first load himself, 12 hours round trip, a gas station sandwich in the cab, back in Memphis at 2:17 in the morning. He was on the road again 6 hours later. 29 years after that, 2,300 trucks, 41 states, 4,800 employees. The original Freightliner still sat in a climate-controlled bay in the warehouse on Lamar Avenue. It had not run in 11 years. No one was permitted to sell it. 2 operations managers had tried separately, reasoning that a non-functioning vehicle was a liability. Both had been wrong about what it was. It was not a sentiment. It was proof that the thing had started. Terrence Voss had understood this about Roland almost from the beginning. He had used it accordingly. Terrence had been COO for 11 years, methodical, precise, deeply fluent in the kind of corporate structure most people experience only as a signature line at the bottom of a document. He had come to Roland with a manner that suggested competence without performance, which Roland had always found more reliable than the other kind. For 11 years, the read had been correct. What Roland had not seen, what had been designed not to be seen, was the architecture Terrence had been building inside the architecture. In the summer of 2021, Roland took a 90-day operational leave to be present for a dying friend and signed a standard emergency delegation agreement granting Terrence full executive authority. The agreement was reviewed by Roland's legal team. It was structured in the ordinary way. What Terrence did inside those 90 days was not ordinary. He executed 3 acquisition agreements with smaller logistics companies, each properly documented, board noticed, within delegated authority. Each also contained a change of control provision buried in Section 14 of the secondary schedules. If the chief executive of Beaumont Freight Solutions was removed from operational authority for any reason, the acquired company's equity stakes would convert to preferred shares purchasable at a fixed price set at the date of original acquisition. The fixed price in all 3 cases was significantly below current market value. The purchasing entity in all 3 cases was a Delaware holding company registered 18 months before the agreements were signed. The sole beneficial owner of that holding company was Terrence Voss. Roland's signature was on every document. Terrence had used the pen Roland handed him to build a door into his own company, invisibly, cleanly, in a way that could not be seen until someone tried to open it. Tonight, Terrence had tried to open it. The meeting at the Peabody had been framed as a quarterly review. 7 board members. Terrence had arrived with a presentation that opened with the 4 days in March 2018 when Roland had been absent without explanation, hospitalized anonymously after a transient ischemic attack on I-55, a fact he had managed privately, and returned from without comment. Terrence had found the gap in the calendar. He had built a narrative around it. A CEO who disappeared without notifying his board, concealed a medical event, demonstrated a pattern. The word he used 3 times was instability. 3 board members Terrence had spent 18 months cultivating voted to table Roland's executive authority pending independent review. 4 did not. Procedural deadlock. The meeting ended at 10:44 p.m. Roland walked out into the rain on Union Avenue. 2 blocks later, at a red light on 3rd and Beale, a car came up fast. 2 men. 47 seconds. They took the Escalade, the phone, the wallet, and drove north. He stood on the sidewalk in the rain with the watch on his wrist, his mother's watch, given to his father the Christmas before she died, passed to Roland the morning of Eugene's funeral in 2003, worn every day since. He did the arithmetic the situation required. He had $3.4 billion in assets and no way to prove it to anyone on this street. He had 4,800 employees and no way to reach one. He had a building 6 blocks away with his name on it in letters 4 feet tall and no credentials to pass the lobby. According to FBI crime data released in 2023, Memphis led the United States in carjacking rate for the 2nd consecutive year, 3.4 incidents per day on average, with downtown and South Memphis accounting for 61% of reported cases. Roland had known this statistic. He had seen it in a city council briefing 2 years ago. He had not understood it as something that happened to a person. He understood it now. He walked to the nearest bus stop on Beale and 2nd and stood under the overhang and waited, because that was what Eugene Beaumont had modeled. When everything else is gone, you wait for the next thing that can carry you, and you get on it and you keep going. The bus came at 11:52 p.m. The woman behind the wheel looked at him in the mirror and said 4 words and closed the doors, and he sat down 3 rows back and looked out at the rain. There was something in the set of her shoulders, something in the particular stillness of her hands on the wheel. He had seen that quality of stillness before, in a different context, on a night he did not let himself revisit. He pushed the thought away and looked back at the rain running down the glass. He was wrong to push it. He would not know that for 8 more days. She found him the next morning by accident, which is to say she found him the way most things worth finding are found. Not by looking for them, but by being in the right place at the right time, because that is where you have always been. The morning run took Yvette past the back side of the Peabody Hotel at 6:23 a.m. southbound on 2nd Avenue, the lights still thin and gray over the river. She was at the wheel of the Route 50 bus, 7 passengers aboard at that hour, the radio off the way she liked it in the early morning before the city had fully committed to being awake. She almost missed him. He was sitting on the bottom step of the service entrance at the rear of the hotel, still in the same suit, now dry but deeply wrinkled in the way fabric wrinkles when it dries on a body. His elbows were on his knees. His hands were folded. He was looking at the pavement the way a person looks at something they are not actually seeing. Yvette noted the stop, noted the time, noted that there was no scheduled stop on 2nd Avenue at that location. She pulled over anyway. She did not tell herself why. She left the engine running, told her 7 passengers she would be 2 minutes, and got off the bus with the brown paper bag she had packed that morning at 4:06 a.m. A biscuit from the batch she made on Sunday nights in frozen portions, a small container of fig preserves, a thermos of black coffee. She had packed it out of habit. She packed one every morning. She ate it on her Central Station break. She was not thinking about this man when she packed it. She set it on the step beside him without speaking. He looked at the bag and then at her. "You were on my bus last night," she said. He nodded. She went back to her bus. He was there the next morning too, in the same place, approximately the same time. 6:24 a.m., the service entrance step, same posture, same quality of stillness. This time she had packed 2 biscuits. She had not told herself she was doing this intentionally. She sat down on the step beside him and poured 2 cups from the thermos and set one next to him on the concrete and drank from the other and looked out at the river. The Mississippi was doing what it always did at that hour, holding the light differently from the land, a little ahead of the sky, gray going to silver, going to something that had not found its name yet. A barge moved south, slow and enormous, the way things move when they have no reason to hurry. Roland did not speak for 4 minutes. Then he said, "My father worked that dock for 31 years. Yvette did not respond. She drank her coffee. He did not say anything else. She stood up, collected her cup, and went back to her bus. Day 3. 2 biscuits again and a hard-boiled egg she almost didn't include and then did. She sat down. The river, the barge traffic, 3 minutes of silence. Somebody I trusted for 11 years, Roland said. Built a door into my own house. Used my signature to do it. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the water. I handed him the pen. Yvette said nothing. The barge horn sounded once across the water, low and final. I keep thinking about the pen, Roland said. He did not say anything after that. She finished her coffee, stood, nodded once, and went back to her bus. Day 4. She brought 2 biscuits and coffee and a section of orange. She sat down. She said, "They're shutting down the route I drive in 6 weeks. Budget cut." Roland looked at her. It was the first time she had offered anything unprompted. 34% of the households on my route have no other way to get anywhere, she said. No car, no other bus line within walking distance. The city's running the numbers and the numbers say cut it. She paused. The numbers aren't wrong. They're just not counting everything. Roland was quiet for a moment. What are they not counting? There's a woman at stop 7, 79 years old. Dialysis 3 times a week. The 50 is how she gets there. Yvette looked at the river. If the route goes, she figures something out or she doesn't. Nobody at the budget meeting is thinking about her right now. Roland said nothing, but something shifted in his posture, almost imperceptibly, the way the light shifts on water when a cloud moves. Day 5, he said, "Thank you." 2 words, unprompted, before she had even sat down. She sat down, she poured the coffee. She said, "You're welcome." Day 6. They sat for 8 minutes without speaking. She stood up to leave and he said, "Why do you keep coming back?" She considered the question. "Because you were still there," she said. He looked at her. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got," she said, and went back to her bus. Day 7. She sat down. He was already holding his cup. She had left the extra thermos the day before, told him to keep it. He had. The morning was cooler than the ones before it, the October air finally settling into what it meant to be. "You've been driving the same route for 9 years," he said. It was not a question. 9 years in March. Same stops, same faces. Most of them. He turned the cup in his hands. "You ever think about moving to a different route?" "I think about it the way you think about selling that truck," she said. He went very still. She had not intended to say it. She had not known she knew about the truck. She had heard it somewhere, she thought, a mention, a detail from some profile she had half-read years ago, the kind of thing that lodges in memory without announcing itself. She did not explain herself. She let the sentence sit. He did not ask how she knew. He looked at the river for a long time. Then the 40 runs to East Memphis. Good ridership, cleaner stops. That's what Nadine says. "Who's Nadine?" "My colleague. She drives the 52. He nodded slowly. "But you're still on the 50. I'm still on the 50. He looked at the river and didn't say anything else. Yvette stood up to go. She was reaching for her thermos when it happened. The badge on her jacket pocket, clipped to the breast flap the way she always wore it, caught on the step railing as she turned and pulled loose and landed on the concrete face-up between them. She picked it up. But not before Roland's eyes had moved it to it, read it, and stopped. Yvette Caldwell, operator. Mata Moot 50. She reattached the badge and stood up and looked at him. His face had gone to a different place. Not recognition exactly, something adjacent to it. The way she sounds familiar before you remember what language it comes from. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. She went back to her bus. She did not look in the mirror at the service entrance step as she pulled away. She was thinking about the truck, and stop 7, and the 40 seconds, and the particular way he had gone still when she mentioned the truck, and the way he had looked at her badge. That night, Roland did not sleep. He called his attorney from the hotel landline. The front desk had accommodated him on day 2, when he explained the situation with the kind of calm that comes from having already processed the worst of it. And he asked for something that had nothing to do with Terrence Voss or the board or the Delaware Holding Company. He asked for the incident report from a road accident on I-55 northbound, March 14, 2018, near the Airways Boulevard interchange, approximately 7:23 p.m. He asked for the name of the bad bus driver who had stopped. He already half knew. He had known since the badge. He needed to be certain. The report came back at 6:47 the following morning. Roland was sitting on the step when Yvette's bus came around the corner of 2nd Avenue, and he had the printout in his hand. 4 pages, faxed from the attorney's office business center at 6:31 a.m., retrieved by Roland at 6:44, read twice in the elevator on the way back down. He had the pages folded in his jacket pocket when she sat down beside him. He did not take them out right away. He let her pour the coffee. He let the barge move south. He sat with the knowledge of it for a few minutes, the way you sit with something before you set it down, because once you set it down, it belongs to both of you and cannot be taken back. Then he said it. March 14th, 2018. I-55 northbound, 7:23 in the evening. Yvette was lifting her cup. She stopped, set it back down on the concrete without drinking from it. She looked at the river. You were in the car, she said. It was not a question. You stopped your bus, he said. You got out. You held my head still for 11 minutes until the ambulance arrived. He paused. And then you got back on your bus and finished your shift. She did not say anything for a long moment. The river moved. A car passed on 2nd Avenue behind them. The morning was the color of old silver. I didn't know if you were going to make it, she said finally. You were barely conscious. Your breathing kept changing. She looked at her hands around the cup. I just knew I couldn't keep driving. Roland was quiet. He was looking at the place where the river met the sky, the horizon line that on mornings like this was more suggestion than boundary. You called a name, she said. He turned to look at her. Not my name, she said, a name. Phyllis. She said it carefully, the way you say a name that belongs to someone else's grief. I didn't know whose name it was. I just answered it. I said, I'm here. Stay with me. She paused. That's all I said, over and over. 11 minutes. Something had happened in his face that was not quite any single emotion, but was the place where several emotions converge when they arrive at the same time and cannot all be expressed at once. He looked back at the river. Phyllis was my mother, he said. She died on I-55, same interchange, 1979. Yvette absorbed this without comment. She understood now why he had called that name, and she understood what it had meant to someone had answered it. Even a stranger, even a woman who didn't know whose name she was answering. You don't have to know someone's story to give them what the story needs. You just have to be there. I looked for you, Roland said, after. When I got out of the hospital, I had my attorneys pull the incident report. I found your name. He stopped. I found your route. Yvette looked at him. I didn't call, he said. I didn't reach out. I didn't know what to say to someone who had done what you did without staying to be thanked. It felt wrong to make it about me again. He turned the coffee cup in both hands. So I did the other thing. What other thing? In 2019, Mata received an anonymous capital contribution through a municipal infrastructure fund, $2.3 million, allocated specifically to fleet renewal on the South Memphis corridor. He paused. New buses, Route 50 included. Yvette went very still. You've been driving that bus for 5 years, Roland said. The one with the seat adjustment that actually works and the climate system that doesn't run cold on the left side. She stared at him. She had complained about the old bus's climate system for 4 years before the fleet renewal. She had noted, on her first morning in the new vehicle, that the left side vent ran exactly the right temperature. She had attributed it to better engineering. She had never questioned where the money came from. You paid for my bus, she said. I paid for 11 of them, Roland said. Yours was one. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of 6 years, of parallel lives running their separate routes, of two people who had changed each other's trajectory without knowing it, of money spent quietly, and mornings held open 40 seconds longer than regulation, and a name called out in the dark on a highway that had taken a mother, and then nearly taken a son and been witnessed both times by the same woman, who had not known, and could not have known, and had been present anyway. We've been paying each other back for 6 years, Yvette said slowly. Without knowing, Roland said. Without knowing, she agreed. She picked up her coffee cup and drank from it. He did the same. The barge horn sounded again from somewhere south of the bridge. The morning light was coming up properly now, the silver giving way to the first pale yellow of a Memphis October morning, the river catching it and spreading it wide. I called your name, Yvette said. She was not talking about the highway. She was talking about something larger, something that did not have a precise name, but that both of them could feel in the way two people can feel the shape of a thing without being able to describe its edges. And you answered it, Roland said. She looked at him. He looked at her. It was not a romantic moment. It was something older and quieter than romance, the recognition between two people who have been in each other's lives without knowing it, who have shaped each other's days without meeting, who have been, in the most literal possible sense, carrying each other. I need to ask you something, Roland said. Ask. The incident report, the one from that night. He reached into his jacket, took out the folded pages and held them toward her. Your name is in it. If I use this in my defense against the board, as documentation of where I was, why I was absent, proof of the medical event, your name becomes part of a corporate legal filing. Your route, your badge number, your shift record. Yvette looked at the papers in his hand. She did not take them. You're asking my permission, she said. I'm asking your permission. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the river. She thought about Terrence Voss in a boardroom at the Peabody and a presentation built on a gap in a calendar. She thought about a man sitting on a step for 8 mornings because there was nowhere else for him to go. She thought about Stop 7 and the 40 seconds and the woman who had no idea that any of this existed. Use it, she said. Roland nodded once. He put the pages back in his pocket. One condition, Yvette said. He waited. You keep my name out of the press, she said. Whatever happens in that boardroom, whatever filing gets made, I don't want to be a story. I'm a bus driver. That's what I am, and that's what I want to stay. Done, Roland said without hesitation. She stood up. She picked up the thermos. She straightened her jacket and looked at him sitting on the bottom step in the morning light. A man who had built 2,300 trucks out of $3, 200 and a borrowed coat, and now sat on a hotel service step, drinking coffee from a thermos that belonged to a bus driver he had met twice in his life and both times owed everything to. You have everything you need, she said. It was not a question and not a comfort. It was an observation, the kind that closes a door not by locking it, but by making clear that the conversation on this side of it is finished. She went back to her bus. The doors closed. The Route 50 pulled back into traffic, southbound, steady, on time. The story broke on a Wednesday. Not the story Roland wanted told, the one Terrence wanted told. At 7:14 a.m., 14 minutes before Roland's attorneys were scheduled to file the formal response to the board's procedural challenge, the Memphis Business Journal published a piece under a reporter who had been covering the Beaumont freight beat for 6 years. The headline read, Beaumont CCO's mystery hospital stay raised questions about executive transparency. The piece ran 8 4-day absence in March 20 words. It mentioned the anonymous hospitalization, and in the fourth paragraph, citing a source described only as familiar with the incident record, it mentioned that Roland Beaumont had been found on I-55 by a Memphis City bus driver whose name was being withheld pending further reporting. Pending further reporting. Roland read it in the hotel business center at 7:22 a.m. Then he called his lead attorney, Adrian Poole, who had been in her office since 5:30 and had already read it. Terrence, Roland said. Almost certainly the timing is precise. 14 minutes before we file, he wanted you reacting instead of focused. He used the driver. He used the existence of the driver, Adrian said carefully. He doesn't have the name, not yet, but he'll look for it. She asked me to keep her name out of it, Roland said. That's still the condition. There was a pause. Roland, if we go into that boardroom with the medical documentation and her name in the filing, the human element alone. No. His voice was even. We go in with the paper. Just the paper. Her name stays out of every document we file. If we can't win it on the evidence, we find another way. Adrian Poole had represented Roland Beaumont for 14 years. She had watched him make decisions under pressure the way you watch someone move through a familiar room in the dark, competently, from memory, without needing to see. This was a different kind of decision. She could hear the difference in it. All right, she said. Medical records only. Your physician's attestation. Hospital discharge documentation. We redact the incident report entirely. Do it. He hung up. Through the window, he could see 2nd Avenue and the service entrance step empty now because Yvette had already come and gone at 6:23 and he had not been there. He would need to tell her about the article. He would be on the step tomorrow at 6:23. He would tell her then. He went upstairs, changed into the suit his assistant had overnight, charcoal wool, his standard boardroom weight, and went to face the company he had built out of a rented truck and his father's model in 30 years of not stopping. The boardroom was on the 31st floor of the Beaumont Freight Solutions Tower on 2nd Avenue. Roland had chosen this building 14 years ago specifically because you could see the river from the north-facing windows, the whole wide curve of it, the bend where the current flows before the bridge. He had wanted his people to see what his father had worked beside for 31 years. He had never explained this to anyone. It had not occurred to him that it needed explaining. He walked in at 9:03 a.m. 7 board members. Terrence Voss sitting 2 seats from the head of the table, jacket pressed, posture composed, the posture of a man who is prepared for every version of this morning. He looked at Roland the way people look at something they believe they have already accounted for. Roland sat at the head of the table. He set his folder on the surface. He did not open it. Before we begin, Roland said, I want to address the article this morning. Terrence's expression did not change. The article raises about 4 days in March 2018 when I was absent without notification to this board. That is accurate. I was hospitalized at Riverside Memorial following a transient ischemic attack on the evening of March 14th. I was admitted anonymously, treated over 4 days, discharged, and returned to work. I did not disclose the event to the board because it was resolved, because my physician cleared me for full duties, and because I judged, perhaps incorrectly, that it did not rise to the threshold of mandatory executive disclosure. He paused. I will accept this board's determination on whether that judgment was correct. What I will not accept is the characterization that it constituted evidence of instability. He opened the folder. He pushed the first document across the table. This is the discharge summary from Riverside Memorial. This is my attending physician's attestation. This is a clean neurological evaluation from the University of Tennessee Medical Center, dated April 3rd, 2018. He pushed each document as he named it. 3 documents, 3 clean facts. There is no pattern of instability. There is a medical event disclosed late, which I have now disclosed fully. He pushed the second set of documents. These are the 3 acquisition agreements executed during the 2021 delegation period. These are the secondary schedules containing the change of control provisions. This is the Delaware Secretary of State registration for the holding company that holds the purchase rights under those provisions. And this is the beneficial ownership declaration, which names Terrence Voss as the sole owner of that entity. He looked at Terrence. He did not raise his voice. He had not raised his voice once. Those acquisitions were within the scope of my delegated authority, Terrence said. Each one was board noticed. Each one was reviewed. The acquisitions were within scope, Roland said. The self-dealing was not. You used an emergency delegation I granted in good faith to create a mechanism by which you could acquire company equity at below market rates contingent on my removal. That is a breach of fiduciary duty under Delaware law, and it carries personal liability. He closed the folder. I am not asking for a vote today. I am informing this board that my attorneys filed a complaint with the Delaware Court of Chancery at 7:28 this morning, and that a separate referral has been made to the SEC regional office in Atlanta regarding the change of control provisions. He set his hands flat on the table. If anyone here would like to reconsider their position from last week's meeting, now would be the appropriate time. The 3 board members Terrence had cultivated looked at each other, then at Terrence, then at the documents. The first spoke at 9:17 a.m. He wished to rescind his vote from the prior session pending review of the new documentation. The second followed at 9:19. The third stood up, gathered his materials, and left without a word. Terrence Voss resigned by email at 11:43 a.m. from a car already on its way to the airport. Roland sat at the head of the table after the others had gone, looking out the north window at the river. The same river his father had worked beside. The same river he had watched every morning for 8 days from a service entrance step, drinking coffee from a thermos that belonged to a bus driver who packed 2 biscuits and did not ask questions and did not wait to be thanked. He had won on the paper, exactly the way he told Adrian he would. Her name was not in a single document, not in the filing, not in the boardroom, not in the press release his communications team inked at 2:15 p.m., which described the resolution of the board matter and the departure of the COO in 12 sentences and mentioned no one who drove a city bus. He had kept the condition. That was not nothing. In Roland Beaumont's experience, keeping the condition, the actual condition, the specific one, the one that cost you something, was the whole thing. Everything else was paperwork. 14 months later, on a Thursday morning in December, the Memphis Area Transit Authority sent a system-wide internal memo to all depot supervisors, dispatchers, and route operators. The memo was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph announced a 15-year private funding agreement for the continued operation of the South Memphis corridor routes, effective immediately, funded through the Beaumont Community Infrastructure Fund at $2.1 million annually. The second paragraph listed the 7 routes covered by the agreement. Route 50 was the first on the list. The third paragraph noted that the agreement included a provision for route naming rights, and that effective the first Monday of the new year, Route 50 would carry an internal operational designation, the 445 line. Nadine read the memo on her phone in the driver's room at Airways Boulevard Depot at 4:22 a.m. on a Thursday. She walked to where Yvette was at her locker, lacing her boots, and held the phone out without saying anything. Yvette read it. She read it again. She handed the phone back. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she finished lacing her boots, picked up her thermos and her route binder, and went out to the yard. She sat in the bus for 4 minutes before she started the engine. The depot lights were on outside, the same slightly too blue fluorescent, the exhaust from the other buses curling white in the December cold. She held the thermos in both hands and looked at the windshield and thought about a step on 2nd Avenue and a river going silver at 6:23 in the morning, and a man who had needed somewhere to go and had gotten on her bus because his father had modeled the same thing her own father had modeled, and Eugene Beaumont and her father had never met, had taught their children the same lesson from 2 different directions on the same side of the same city. She thought about stop 7. She thought about 40 seconds. She started the engine. She pulled out of the depot at 4:47. She made up the 2 minutes by the 3rd stop. She always made up the 2 minutes. The envelope arrived at the depot on a Tuesday in January, 3 weeks after the route designation went into effect. It was left at the front desk by a man the receptionist described as tall, in a dark coat, who did not give his name. The envelope was plain white, letter-sized, with Yvette Caldwell written on the front in handwriting that was unhurried and deliberate, the handwriting of a person who had taken their time with each letter. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, not a letter, not a check, not a contract. It was a photocopy of a police incident report. 4 pages, I-55 northbound March 14th, 2018. Near Airways Boulevard interchange, 7:23 p.m. The pages were old enough that the copy had gone slightly gray at the edges. In the third paragraph of the first page, under the heading First Responding Non-Emergency Party, a name had been written in the original blue ink of a police officer's pen, Caldwell, Yvette M. MATA operator. MUTE 50, her name, in blue ink. Written by someone who had watched her hold a man still on a highway shoulder for 11 minutes and had written her name down because it was the right thing to do and because names should be recorded when people do the right thing. Below her name, at the bottom of the fourth page, Roland had added 4 words in his own handwriting. The same deliberate, unhurried script as the envelope. I know it now. Yvette read the pages standing at the front desk. She read them through once. Slowly, she folded them along the existing creases. Someone had folded and unfolded this paper many times before she ever touched it, and she put it in the breast pocket of her jacket, left side, over her heart. She went to her bus. She sat down. She started the engine. The 445 line pulled out of the depot into the December dark. At stop 7 on Person Avenue, Yvette opened the doors at 5:03 a.m. and held them. 1 second, 10, 20. The supervisor's voice was still in her memory, the way it always was, called, "Well, you are running 40 seconds behind at stop 7 every single morning. You understand that, Cascades. 35 seconds. 40, the sound of slow footsteps on the bottom step, then the top. The familiar weight settling into the first seat behind the driver's partition. A soft exhale, the kind that belongs to a person who has made it somewhere they needed to be. Yvette closed the doors. She looked in the rearview mirror for a moment, not at the woman in the first seat, but at the rows of seats behind her, at the dark city outside the windows, at the faint reflection of her own face in the upper corner of the glass. Navy uniform. Badge on the breast pocket, left side. She thought about what it meant that the 445 line was still running. Not because of a budget meeting or a policy decision or a line item in a municipal spreadsheet. Because a man had gotten on a bus in the rain with no way to pay the fare, and a woman had said, "Sit down," and 8 mornings on a river step had led to a boardroom and a Delaware filing, and a press release that mentioned no one who drove a bus, and then to a memo, and then to an envelope, and then to 4 words written by hand now resting in the breast pocket of a uniform that smelled like diesel and coffee, and the industrial cleaner that Yvette had stopped noticing in year 3, and noticed again on days when she had been away. Nothing about this was miraculous. That was the point. A miracle would have required an exception to the ordinary rules. This had required only that the ordinary rules be followed by people who understood what they were actually for. Hold the door. Stay with the person. Keep the condition. Come back tomorrow. Roland Beaumont kept the original Freightliner in a climate-controlled bay on Lamar Avenue because it was proof that the thing had started. He had driven that truck alone through the night with a gas station sandwich and arrived back in Memphis at 2:17 in the morning and gone out again 6 hours later, and everything, the 2,300 trucks, the 41 states, the 4,800 people who went to work because he had started, everything came from that. From showing up and not stopping. Yvette Caldwell had been showing up at 4:45 in the morning for 9 years. Nobody had named that either, until now. The name didn't make it more true. It just made it visible. The 445 line moved south through Memphis in the December dark, the city opening up around it the way it always did, slowly, reluctantly, one light at a time, the way things open when they are not yet sure that they are ready but are going to open anyway because the morning does not wait for readiness. It just comes. This is a work of fiction. Yvette Caldwell and Roland Beaumont do not exist. No bus driver stopped on I-55 in March 2018 and held a stranger still for 11 minutes, at least not this one, not in this way. But the conditions that make this story feel true are not fictional. According to the American Public Transportation Association's 24, the industry report, the United States faces a transit funding gap of more than a 100 transit funding and need of laid in $76 billion over the next decade. The systems most likely to face service cuts are concentrated in lower-income urban corridors, the routes people with no alternative. In Memphis specifically, MTA operates on per-mile funding in the bottom 12% of comparable systems nationally. The riders who depend on those routes most are, in a majority, Black women over 35 working service sector jobs for wages between $13 and $18 an hour. They show up at 4:45 in the morning. They hold doors open 40 seconds longer than they are supposed to. They do not wait to be thanked because the morning does not wait for them. There are 45 lines in every city in this country. Most of them do not have names. Most of the people who drive them don't have anything named after them at all. They have routes, and the routes keep running because they keep showing up. I wrote this story because I think we have forgotten how to see the people holding things together while we are not looking. This one is for them. If you are still here, if you made it to the end of Yvette's story and Roland's story and the server entrance step and the 40 seconds and the 4 words written at the bottom of a police report, then you already know what this story is about. It is not about money. It is about what happens when someone stops when they are not required to stop. When someone shows up when they are not expected. When someone keeps a condition because they said they would. Because the actual condition, the one that costs something, is the whole thing. Has someone ever stopped for you? Not because they had to. Not because it was convenient or they were being watched. Just because you were there and they couldn't keep going without doing something about it. Tell me about them in the comments. I read every single one, and the ones about people who showed up quietly, without announcement, without expectation, those are the ones I carry. If this story meant something to you, share it with the person who has been your 445 line. The one who shows up before you've decided to be awake. The one who holds the door 40 seconds longer than they're supposed to. They probably don't know that's what they are to you. They might need to hear it. Like this video if Yvette's story stayed with you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Stories about the people the spreadsheet isn't counting. Ones whose work doesn't show up in any quarterly report but holds everything else together. Turn X storycations, because the next is coming, and it starts the way all the real ones do, not with a miracle, but with an ordinary person making an ordinary decision and that turns out to be anything but. Stay kind, stay blessed, and never underestimate the power of one quiet act of love.